Hi, so this is a video which is part of an article on relaxation and tension on classical guitar. And you can read the full article on thisisclassicalguitar.com. If you're watching this on YouTube, just go to the little about section underneath. I'll put a link to the actual article there. Because in the article, I will link to some of the exercises that I talk about in the books that I talk about. And you can see all that information and the links as well. So tension and relaxation is a huge topic, and it comes up all the time when I'm teaching. Actually, I was just in Calgary giving some adjudications and private lessons, and the topic came up there for sure as well. And so people have many questions about it. So I'm going to start this video off with just a discussion about tension and relaxation, and then in the second part of the video I'll talk about some exercises you can do, so some actual things that you can add to your daily practicing to alleviate tension and aim for a relaxed kind of style. So the first thing is that we should clarify something, is that there's no separating tension and relaxation from the rest of your practice, whether it be musical practice or technical practice. So I think to a large extent, relaxation is partly accomplished by how efficient you use your hands and how precise your movements are and efficient your movements are. And I think that results in relaxation to an extent, right? Can't just flick a switch one day and say, I'm going to be relaxed when I play something. If your hands are using bad technique, you won't be able to relax. You need to be using efficient, healthy techniques, and from there you can aim for relaxation. So first thing about the word relaxation, I really like how Charles Duncan puts it in his book. He talks about functional tension and then dysfunctional tension. So dysfunctional tension is just going to be like many awkward movements, movements caused by bad technique or by restraining the body in some way that isn't healthy. Doesn't allow you to work in an ergonomic way. And then functional tension is just being very precise about how much tension is actually needed. And when we think about it, these strings on the guitar are so wimpy, like they're so easy to push down. They're just little tiny strings. I can push them down with so little force. So that's a really important fact. Some other comments about relaxation is, I think as the complexity level of pieces goes up, people's tension generally goes up too, just as they have to multitask and do a number of maybe more awkward technical requirements, they certainly increase their tension. So one thing that I would recommend is that you play lots of easy music. I mean, you should have a gig book or a collection of pieces that are really nice and easy that you can play without tension, so that you can actually pay attention to what's going on in your playing without having to read super carefully and be so precise with your playing, but more that you can play for an extended period of time with music easy enough that you can just focus on what you're actually feeling like, what you're doing with your body. And as many books will say too, I mean, people that just are very aware of their body do things like yoga or tai chi or other activities that focus on relaxing the body and using only the amount of tension that's needed, will have a better awareness of themselves and their bodies, and so they can transfer that to the instrument very well. When I'm teaching relaxation, one of the things I like to make very clear to my students is I think that relaxation is a part of muscle memory, in the same way that learning to place your fingers properly on the guitar or learn like the notes of a scale are muscle memory. So we practice these movements all the time, putting our fingers in the correct places and curving our fingers and stuff like that. And our fingers remember how to do that. So I think when you talk about relaxation, you need to think about the same thing. You need to make sure you're actually practicing it every day so that your muscles remember how to relax. A great example is if I'm teaching a small child who doesn't think about relaxation. But if I tell them that they have to relax at a very specific place of the piece, so maybe after a cadence, I'll say, you have to reset and push the reset button and relax at the end of that phrase. And then I tell them that every time, they do it every time they practice, and their parents make them do it every time they practice, then what you start to see is that when the student is playing, every time they get to that one little part there, you can actually see them like lower their shoulders and relax. And not because they're thinking about it, but because it's in their muscle memory. So that's a very important fact, is that we have to practice relaxation as a part of muscle memory every single time we practice, especially if you have like a problem with this, right? A couple of other things. If you identify tension as a problem in your playing, you need to address it, of course. And I think the best way to address that is with progressive materials. So for example, in my little technique book, the 20 favorite exercises, which you can get from the website, it starts off with very easy exercises, such as just a 4-fingered exercise. And then the next exercise in the book is a little bit harder. It moves up with a shift every time. And then it goes into, more and more complex exercises, and then you have stretches and all sorts of things. But the important thing is that when you start with that first exercise, you're going to say, well, I'm going to use as little tension as possible and be as precise as possible with how my technique is supposed to look. And then once you feel like you can go through that exercise without too much tension, you're generally relaxed. Once you feel like you can do that, then when you move to the next exercise, the one that's slightly more difficult, that you retain the same amount of relaxation that you have been using in the previous one. So the technique gets only a little tiny bit harder each time, but you're going to maintain the same level of relaxation as you progress to the next exercise, not allowing yourself to go on to another exercise unless you are indeed relaxed. So that's a very important fact, is using progressive materials. And there's lots of progressive books out there. You can use method books. I have a free method book you can just download off the site. But you can also get things like my technique book. There are other books. Ricardo Isanola's book is quite progressive as well. It gets very difficult, but it's progressive. There's not a ton of progressive books out there, actually, but they do exist, so you can find them. Okay, let's move on to some actual specific exercises in regards to technique and relaxation and reduction of tension. First thing is you have to make sure that your spine in your sitting position is very stable. So your spine is kind of this column of relaxation, and your muscles hang off of that, off of your spine. So your spine creates the proper posture, and then your muscles hang off of that. If you want to do something really gross, I always tell my young students this because they like the gross stuff, is that you can think of it as like a hook, and there's a big steak on that hook. So it's a meat hook, and the meat is just hanging off the hook, which is kind of just a little bit gross. So with that in mind, you're not leaning to one side too much, whatnot. You're relaxed in that way. And one great thing to do for the reduction of tension is to learn how to do the movements, so the actual finger movements. I guess I'm focusing on the left hand right now, but learn to do the finger movements, but without the tension, which seems like it would be an obvious thing, but we don't always do it. One way of doing that is to do a muted technique. So a muted technique is when, instead of pushing the string down so it hits the fret, you touch the string, but you don't push it down. So what that looks like is if you're pushing the string down, it touches the metal like that. But what I'm saying is don't actually push the string down, just touch the string. And what you'll end up with is this kind of muted sound. So by doing that, you are teaching, and make sure you use good technique, but by doing that, you're making sure that you're learning the movements, the required movements of the fingers, and all the finger independence that you need, but you're not doing it with any tension at all. Doesn't sound great, but it doesn't sound that bad. I mean, you can still hear the pitches actually, but you're not going to push that down. So you're learning the movements, but you're not actually applying any pressure. a great thing about muted exercises too is that if you really dig in with the right hand, well, one major issue with tension is that sometimes when you're playing loud, so you're working really hard with the right hand, so you're digging in really hard with this hand, you start to dig in also with this hand, and you start to clench. With the muted exercises, you can't. You can only push the string. You can't push the string at all. You can only touch it. And so if you play really loud with this hand, and you really dig in, you can do like heavy rest strokes. This hand can't dig in at all. It can't clench because it's only just doing the movements and just touching the strings. So that's a fantastic exercise because it disassociates the tension between the two hands. It allows you to work hard with this hand but work very lightly with this one. So breaking that connection. For lots of students, this muted exercise isn't quite enough. So the fact that they are able to suddenly do muted exercises doesn't quite cut it, because that's either just no tension, and then when they play, they just start applying tension again. I like to make my more advanced students, this is a little bit tedious, but I like to make them do it, is where they will do an in-between muted. So they'll push the string down, but only enough that it buzzes. Do you hear that? So I'm pushing it down so lightly that the string is touching the fret, but then when I play it, the string's bouncing up and down on the fret. It's really tough to do because you have to apply a very specific amount of tension. And I think that's the important part, is that by applying just a very specific part, you're teaching your hand different levels, not just off and then on levels of tension, but in between levels of tension. And so it's making you ultra aware of how much tension you're actually going to use. And then to go the next step after that buzzing is just ever so slightly harder so it's not buzzing, and that's how much tension is actually needed to play. Just make sure you're close to the frets, because if you're playing over here, it's going to buzz even if you're using lots of pressure. So make sure you're really, really close to those frets. So I think those are really great things to add to your practice sessions. But I want to remind you once again that the efficiency of your technique, particularly the curvature in your fingers, for example, is just as important to relaxation as any little exercise we can invent, because we can come up with tons of exercises about relaxation, but the truth of the matter is that you have to sit properly, and you have to use your hands in as an efficient way as possible. Because if you extend your fingers like this, and then you try to push them, you have no strength in those fingers. When you curl your fingers, you have all this strength available to you. And you can use that as functional tension, but you have such a large ratio of power when you're using good technique that you only have to apply such a small amount that it doesn't stress your hands out at all and doesn't affect the rest of your body. But all of these things, that everyone holds tension in different ways. I used to hold it really in my jaw, so I used to kind of grind my teeth as I play, and I had to do weird things. I had to sit in front of a mirror and practice and smile as I play. Smile to myself. It was really strange, if anyone was ever looking in the window or something. But I had to activate my awareness of tension there. Other things is that many people, when they play, they try to sit very still, like John Williams, who maybe only winks at us every once in a while. But that is sometimes a form of tension itself. That's why I encourage just experiment with a little bit of movement when you play. Just to be aware that if your muscles are really tense in your neck, for example, that you are able to move them in a relaxed way. One last exercise. This is an exercise that's actually, I believe, I originally read it out of The Inner Game of Music, which is that kind of spin-off of The Inner Game of Tennis by Barry Green, I believe. In The Inner Game of Music, one of the exercises is to do a movement with a ton of tension, to start with tension. So really tense up. And then relax relax through the exercise so that you learn to actually relieve tension while doing precise movements. So if you think about it, when you're playing pieces, that's the thing you probably have to be able to do, right? You want to be aware of how much tension you're using, and you want to be aware that when the tension starts to build, you need to relieve it. So by starting really tense, and then relieving the tension, you are actually practicing the art of relieving tension while doing the movements as you play, which is probably the best thing, because that's the most practical thing that you could do in a piece, right? Is to actually relax as you play certain parts, so that you have areas where maybe the tension increases, but then there's some relaxation and it can kind of the tension can fade away. So we've gone through some muted exercises, some ideas about the relieving tension. And also, I would take a pencil and in your pieces, I would mark very specific places when you have to reset and totally start again, relax. So let's say you've been playing away. Maybe there, I was starting to get like tense over here like this. Maybe there I have to stop and start again. And relax there. So I'm going to always relax there. And maybe that should have been one too, because you saw me starting to build up a little bit. And then continue to relax. And you can combine this with musical ideas and make sure it's a part of your piece, that when you cadence, for example, or start a new section, or you're approaching some kind of destination point, that you actually write in your music, relax here, and that every time you practice it, you're going to practice the muscle memory of relaxation. So I hope that was a useful discussion to you. As always, make sure you have a great teacher to help you identify where you might be holding tension, because it's often tricky to identify on your own. It's so common that we can't notice where it is that we are tensing up, where in our body, for example, because we're distracted with all these notes, right? So continue to research this and read it and become aware of your own body, and just think about it every single time you practice. It's essentially something that you have to include in your practice sessions for the rest of your life, and you just continue to work at it and get better, and it should be a very positive thing that you add to your practice sessions, and you just don't stop. There's no quick solution to it. You have to practice relaxation every day. All right, so you can check out the rest of the article though on This is Classical Guitar, and I hope you enjoyed the little lesson, and there'll be more to come. Thanks so much.